Good morning. Today, we will focus on the general theory of values. Value studies has started at the beginning or at the very start of the 20th century. In 1928, Sprenger, who was a philosopher, proposed a philosophical theory of values. I'm not going to go into detail of this theory today, but I would like that you know the name Sprenger, a philosopher. Then different psychologists and sociologists developed theories to measure the values of societies or institutions or individuals. Today, my focus will be on the most well-known two basic theories in sociology and social psychology. Before going into details of these two theories, my purpose is that you first understand the concept of values perfectly well. Okay, that's very important because I believe the concept is not very well understood, and if you can't understand the concept perfectly well, it's not possible that we have effective and successful applications regarding this concept. So some part of the presentation will include some slides that we have covered in the previous, at the start of the semester in the previous weeks, but I would like that you remember these basics first. So let's get started. Okay, what's the etymology first of the concept of values? Okay, etymology, the meaning of a word as it appeared in a cultural context. So value appeared in around 14th century in the Western culture as a concept, and it has entered in the Merriam-Webster dictionary around this era. It comes from Old French word value, which means worth or value exactly. Its non-use comes from French valua, be worth. And in Latin, there is a verb, valere. Valere means to be strong, to be well, and to be of value. So that's the etymology of the concept of value. So as you could understand by now, the connotation, the implicit meaning of value is positive. So when we say something is a value, we mean something positive. Although this is the case, we will learn in the future that there are also negative values, but most of the time, the theoreticians and the researchers and the measurements are based on the fundamental understanding that values are positive concepts. So there are many different definitions offered by different theoreticians. Kluckhohn, for instance, is a sociologist. And in his theory of action, he defined a value as a conception, explicit or implicit, and distinctive of an individual or characteristic of a group of the desirable that influences the selection from available modes, means, and ends of action. So look at the bold underlined concepts. These are the key concepts in this definition. Distinctive of an individual means that a value as a conception of the desirable. What is desirable? So a value is a concept which defines what is desirable. And it becomes, once a person believes that a certain value is important, that the definition of the desirable is important for him or her, then this makes this person different from other people. Sorry. So value concepts or importance that people place on values distinguish them from other people. Therefore, values are individual difference variables as personality variables. Values do not only distinguish individuals from other individuals, but also different groups in the society might have their group-related important values. So these values make these groups different from other groups in the system. So this time we can conceive values as a group difference variable. And it defines what is desirable, and knowing what is desirable and believing it in its importance as an individual influences our selection, our choosing among available that we can do. It means available modes, different types, in other words, means, and ends of actions. So values guide our behaviors, in other words. In another definition by a social psychologist from the Gestalt school, Kurt Lewin, we observe that values determine which types of activity have a positive and which have a negative valence for an individual in a given situation. So valence means in Turkish değerlik, that's how we translate it. Valence is the value of an object that we place on it. So for instance, if let's say wealth is important to you, wealth is a value, varlık sahibi olmak, or richness, let's say, okay? If wealth is important to you, then money as an object would have a positive valence, okay? If honesty is important to you, let's say, as a value, then a bribe, rüşvet, would be some object as represented in our long-term memory. It will be evaluated negatively. So values help us to make sense of our objects in terms of evaluations. And as you know, the way we evaluate objects helps us to approach or avoid them. If we have positive valence for an object, we approach it. If the object has a negative valence, then we avoid it. And all these objects are related to different situations. So money, for instance, can be related specifically to the job or situations. So each attitude object appears in a different context. So values guide our behaviors in different contexts by helping us to define the positivity or negativity of these objects in these contexts. Rakic is an important theoretician in social psychology and sociology, and we will go through his theory today. He defines value as an enduring belief that a specific mode of conduct, how you behave, it means, or an end state, goal, it means, of existence is personally or socially preferable. So values are beliefs about what we might prefer to do so, or which goals are preferable among other goals to us. And this preference definition or belief can be personal or socially defined. And as such kind of a belief, values define what is personally or socially preferable to an opposite or converse mode of conduct or end state of existence. So it helps us to choose among different behaviors. So we make our choices by referring to our beliefs about desirable, which are values. Schwartz is the second theoretician that we will go through today. His theory is more recent. He started working on value theory in 1987 with Bilski. And this Schwartz theory had gone through different changes. But today we will focus on the second version of the theory, which is easier to represent, I believe. So Schwartz's definition of a value is that a value is a cognitive representation of universal human requirements, or human needs, in other words. So we have certain needs. Hunger is a need. Thirst is a need. Achievement is a need. Affiliation or power, these are different needs. But needs are, as we will go through shortly, needs are motivational states, internal states, most of the time that we are not aware of. Whereas values are conceptions. They are representations or sort of schematic representations of our needs, which we are not conscious of. So values are conscious guiding principles in our lives. And these conscious representations represent or define what our needs are. So when we say success is important to me, we become aware of our need for achievement. When we say dominance is important to me, then we mean that power as a need is important for us. Another definition by Schwartz in a later paper is that a value is desirable, or values are desirable transsituational goals. Transsituational means values do not guide behaviors, or values are not bound with contexts. Hunger, for instance, can be bound in a specific context. For instance, if you smell the odor of the food in the kitchen, your need for hunger is activated. But taste, perhaps, having pleasure in life as values can guide any kind of behavior in any context. That's why it's not context bound. That's why we call values situational goals. They vary in importance, which means that different values are important in different levels, and they serve as guiding principles in the life of a person or other social entity. So values guide our behaviors. We refer to our values in justifying our behaviors or attitudes, but it is not only a personal guidance, also other social entities such as institutions. Science, for instance, is a sociological institution, or family is a sociological institution. So how families should function, or how scientists or science, the institution of science should function, is also defined by certain values. A final definition by Schwartz is that values are conceptions of the desirable that guide the way social actors, which means any human being, select actions, evaluate people and events, and explain their action and evaluations. So these are some basic functions of values. They guide us to choose among different courses of action. How to behave is decided by the guidance of values. Values are standards. They give us definition of the good or bad, the right or wrong, and so on. So having such kind of definitional properties, we use our important values to evaluate other people and also to evaluate ourselves and also to evaluate events around us or social issues, and they help us to explain our actions and evaluations. They are justifications for why we think in a certain way or why we behave in a certain way. So these are some definitions from the literature. Now, the first definition in the slide is an amalgam, let's say. It's a combination of many different definitions and theories. So values are hierarchically ordered and relatively enduring beliefs. Enduring means they last. If you believe some value is important, it doesn't change overnight. You have your values as having almost the same importance level for a very long period of time in your life. Because if they change quickly, they can't guide you. So you have to defend, or you have to maintain your value systems. And they are hierarchically ordered. It means that some values are more important than some other values. So they are hierarchically ordered and relatively enduring beliefs which are acquired or learned in the socialization process. We talked about socialization process, and which guide human conduct or behavior by indicating which goals and behaviors are socially and personally desirable. So we can maintain this definition as a very general definition fed by different theoretical points of view. Williams is a sociologist. He basically has a theory about value change in society. He defines values as the criteria or standards in terms of which evaluations are made. We talked about this. And finally, as cognitive representations of human needs, values are used as standards to evaluate the self. So, overall, what are values? One, values are beliefs. They are enduring beliefs. They don't change quickly, but they guide what is right or wrong. So we can evaluate ourselves, people, and events and social issues. They guide our actions. We choose among different actions depending on what we believe to be right or wrong, in other words. And they are hierarchically ordered because some values are more important than some other values. And these differences, these importance differences or hierarchy differences distinguish individuals and groups from each other. So that's a quick summary of what values are. Now, I believe having set the stage, now we can go through some specific concepts in values theory. I would like to differentiate specifically three concepts in values theory: value types, value systems, and value priorities. Let's start with a value system. a value system is an enduring organization of beliefs. In other words, we have many different values in our value systems. So success, dominance, helpfulness, richness, pleasure. Um, let's think about, okay, protecting nature, respect for elderly people, and so on and so forth. We have a large set of values, but some values are similar to each other, some values are not similar to each other, and depending on the importance that we place on each value, these values become more similar or less similar, or relevant or irrelevant to each other. So in our long-term memory, we have interrelationships between many value concepts. And these interrelationships is a pattern, a general pattern, and this pattern of interrelationships is called a value system. Okay? Now, in the following slides, we will observe that value systems are almost the same across all cultures and individuals. But the difference is in the importance placed to or attributed to different values by different people, but their interrelationships are almost the same across cultures. So a value system is defined as such. Then comes another important concept, which is value type. Now, success, ambition, ability, these are three different value concepts, okay, specific concepts, but they have a common property. They serve the same motivation, okay? Success, ambition, ability, intelligence. These are different concepts, but they can be grouped together because they have the same motivation, or they define almost the same goal, okay? In such a case, if different value concepts serve the same motivation, then they can be grouped together, and this grouping is called a value type. So a value type is the organization of a set of values with respect to similar underlying motivations. And there are three universal motivations, basically, which are our biological needs, our interpersonal needs that we would like to get related with other people, and intergroup needs that we have to or that we choose to become members of different groups in the society or different social categories, and these groups have to interact with each other in the wider society. So these needs define different types of values. We will go through this in detail later. And finally, a value priority is the hierarchical ordering of values in the individual and cultural level with respect to the relative importance of values. So, suppose you believe success is very important. Success requires that you set moderately difficult goals to yourself as defined by social standards, and that you put effort to achieve your goals, and you express in a way your individuality in doing these things. Okay, so success requires that you enhance yourself, but sometimes we may have other kinds of values, such as helpfulness, let's say. So success is one value, helpfulness is another value. Okay, helpfulness requires that you disregard for a certain period of time, let's say, you disregard your own needs to meet the needs of another person. Okay, now in this case, helpfulness represents a motivation for the concern of others. Concern for self is success, concern for others is helpfulness. And if you believe success is more important than helpfulness, now it means you have a success related value priority. But if you have helpfulness being the most important value, then your value priority changes. Priority means öncelik. So which one is more important than which other one? Okay, this is called a value priority. So what are the components and functions of values? In psychology, typically we define a given hypothetical construct in terms of three components: cognitive, affective, and behavioral components. Values have a cognitive component because it is a representation of our needs, and they are also beliefs which prescribe or proscribe behaviors. Prescription means do it kind of principles. Proscription means do not do it kind of uh, principle. So for a student, for instance, that a student should study hard is a prescription, which can be part of the representation of success need. Proscribe, being, for instance, in terms of for a student, would involve such something like this. A student shouldn't cheat on the exams. Okay, so this is a proscription, don't do it kind of definition. And that's a representation, a belief in our long-term memory. The affective component of values refers to emotional part of values. We feel emotional when we affirm and defend our values. Affirming a value means that you do something which validates the truthfulness or the truth status of your value. So if you believe helpfulness is important, and if you help another person to carry his or her goods, an elderly person, let's say, okay, this behavior would affirm your value of helpfulness or respect for elderly, let's say. So affirming means validating the truthfulness of a value. Defending means that sometimes our values can be in conflict with other people's values. So if somebody does something which does not fit into our value priorities, we react. We react because we would like to protect our value system or value priorities. We defend them. We do some things in reaction so that we validate the truthfulness of our value system against another value system. So this is defending. And finally, values have a behavioral component because when values as concepts in our long-term memory are activated, they become accessible in our memory, usable in our memory, then they help us to behave in a certain way, which helps us to express the importance of these values. So if honesty is important for a person, and if this person tells the truth, telling the truth to another person, no matter it would bring negative or positive consequences, then this person would feel content. Kendinden razı. Why? Because he did something which fits into his or her important values. So these are the three components, ABCs of values. So what are the functions of values? In the definitions, actually, we went through some important functions. Values are standards of judgment or evaluation. So we use them as rulers, measurement sticks, to measure the rightness or wrongness or goodness or badness of behaviors or situations or people or events. They have a motivational function, such as they motivate our actions, they energize our actions, and they have an adjustive function, meaning that a certain mode of conduct or end state of existence is desirable, facilitates adaptation to the interpersonal, intergroup or in-group or societal demands. So values help us to adjust or to adapt the changes in the environment. So if health is an important value, let's say, okay, that it has an adjustive function means that having an important value as health leads us, guides us, helps us to adapt to the coronavirus pandemic situation, and we stay home. Okay, it has values have ego defensive functions. Ego defensive means we defend, we try to protect ourselves. They help us to justify our actions such that the self is psychologically protected from the socially unapproved consequences and save the self from threat. So having the value of, let's say, health is or might have ego defensive function because when we stay home, we feel ourselves protected from threat, the threat of being contaminated, okay? And finally, values have knowledge or self-actualization functions. Having certain value priorities helps us to explain the world and place of the self in it. So values are parts of our worldviews, the way we come to perceive the existence, the way we come to make the existence of the environment and of ourselves in it meaningful. So values are kind of knowledge packages, okay? When we extract these packages, they provide us knowledge about what is right or wrong. So we make our existence meaningful through the lens of our important values. So these are the basic functions of human values. Now, I'll start comparing and contrasting values to some other psychological variables, which you might be very well aware of. This distinction is important because if we cannot theoretically distinguish one concept from the other, it is not an independent concept what values are. So we will start with the comparison or contrasting of values to needs. Let's start first with needs. Perhaps you have heard about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay? Needs are basically biologically determined internal psychological or physiological energies, let's say, okay? They energize our behaviors. It is like driving a car, okay? If you don't push the gas pedal, okay, you cannot move the car. So motivations or needs are the gasoline in our cars. When we push the pedal, the car moves or we behave. So needs are central affective states, central meaning inside the person, okay? And they are affective states. They have an emotional or affective component in them. And these affective states, what you feel inside as an urge to do something, okay? They are triggered, startled by cue stimuli in the environment, okay? And so let's suppose, or let's consider hunger need, okay? Your hunger need is not something that you are aware of most of the time, okay? But you would feel hungry, you might become conscious about being hungry, of course, but first of all, there should be certain stimuli which starts these needs, such as the acid level in your stomach or the insulin level in your blood. These are internal stimuli which starts the hunger process. But at the same time, there might be environmental stimuli which can trigger, which can startle the hunger need, such as the very delicious smell of a food, let's say, okay? So these start needs beyond your consciousness automatically, and you feel an urge, an affective orientation that to do something, let's say. But in order that a need can be triggered by the environmental or internal stimuli, there should be some sort of deprivation. So in the case of hunger, deprivation means that you didn't eat anything for a very long period of time. In this case, a need becomes stronger. And once a need is triggered by the environmental cue stimuli, then they help us to select, direct, and energize goal-relevant action. So we select to do something. If we become hungry, we choose to do certain things. We can fix something to eat. We can go somewhere to eat. We can choose a different kind of food to eat. It can be vegetable or meat or whatever. So they help us to select goal-relevant action, whether we go to cafeteria or we fix something, a sandwich, let's say, to eat at home. It directs our actions. So it is kind of, we start doing something, we start, let's say, doing or fixing a sandwich for ourselves, but we don't stop until we finish fixing the sandwich. So hunger need is the energy underlying this fixing. And they energize our actions. They help us to find the energy to do these behaviors. So in this case, not in this case. So in that kind of a definition, a need is something unconscious, affective, automatic process, okay? Values now as standards of the desirable, they define the desirable, can generate motivation by serving as a guide to evaluate a particular situation and the discrepancy between this situation and the optimal situation for the individual. So a value of, let's say, having pleasure in life can help you to define whether you're going to fix the sandwich that way, having cheese in it, or let's say or having sausage in it or some other kind of ingredient, okay? Which one is the best, okay, for you? So values help you to make such decisions. So if health is important, you might choose boiled or steamed vegetables. But if taste is important to you, perhaps you would choose something like a hamburger, okay? So it depends on which value is important for you. On the other hand, needs are affective forces which people are not consciously aware of, and action tendency is a function of both needs and values. So just assume that you are very hungry. It's not enough. There should be a value of eating for you so that you eat, actually. So behavior is defined, or behavior is determined together by needs and values as a multiplicative function. So what's the difference between values and needs then? Values define what is desirable, istenir olan, whereas needs define the desired, arzu edilen. Arzu edilen is something internal, an urge, an affective urge, whereas desirable requires some sort of thinking, okay? So let's compare values to goals. Goals are mental images of end states. An end state is a state of existence. So your goal, for instance, as a student in this course might be to have a grade AA. So the grade AA, as represented in your mind, is a goal, okay? And you tend to approach this goal because it has desirable qualities. AA is something good, for instance. AA feels you good about yourself and so on. So it has desirable qualities, so you try to approach it. Values, then, as the cognitive representations of the desirable, are functional in determining which goals to be chosen among other alternatives, okay? So if success is important to you, you might set yourself goals as a student, which refer to high standards of outcomes or learning related goals. So values serve as criteria for choosing goals. And some values may be representations of desirable goals themselves, such as success or friendship, okay? Let's go through this example now, okay, here. This is a text, I made it up. It's a hypothetical situation so that we can read and understand in a text specific examples of needs, values, goals, and so on. So suppose that a student encounters an academic challenge of writing a project paper. So writing a project paper requires many different behaviors. If the student is high in need for achievement, so if you have a motivation to achieve, then this challenge can be expected to activate this need. It's a challenge to write a project paper is a challenge. And you would like to write it as best as possible if you are high in need for achievement. And it can expect to activate this need accompanied by future anticipations of whether she could accomplish this particular task in competence. So what is future anticipations? You try to predict yourself in the future. If I do this in writing this project, then I will have this kind of results. So you might say yourself, you imagine yourself in the future and you say, if I make a good literature search, I can read different and important papers and my project paper can become very intelligible, a high quality paper. Okay, you anticipate yourself in the future. If I write it so, I will feel very good about it. I will be content about the product that I produced. And you also might anticipate, think about future, that how you will feel when you achieve your goal. If I write a good project paper, then I will feel happy, I will feel content, it will be exciting, and so on. So needs drive us in that way. Then this hypothetical individual can set a moderately difficult goal with certain specific principles to follow and deadlines to be met. This goal can be expected to guide the goal-directed behaviors. So I'm going to write 1 page long content tomorrow. This is a goal. and you do it through the guidance of your goal, through the guidance of your motivation, need for achievement. And this goal can be expected to guide the goal-directed behaviors of the student, which are anticipated to be instrumental, helpful to achieve that goal. And the strength of the need for achievement will most likely lead to accomplishment of this task if the particular value or terminal value called success is a desirable end state for you. So if being successful is important to you, and if you are very much motivated to achieve with a standard of excellence, then when they combine together, you are going to work on this project regularly, each and every day, and try to do it in the most excellent way possible. Okay, so this is how our psychological processes produce behaviors through the interaction of values and goals. Another relevant concept is social norms. We may compare values to norms. Social norms are culturally based, situation-specific prescriptions of conduct. So this is let's think about a social norm. Stand up in a public transportation. If you observe that an elderly people gets in, then you stand up and leave your place to her. Okay, that's a social norm. It defines what you should do in a specific context. So they have mode of conduct properties, what type of behavior is expected. Values transcend situations, as you remember, and imply end states as well as modes of conduct. Values are not only definitions of how to behave, they are also definitions of how to be. Okay, so the relationship between values and social norms is that values serve as standards to accept or reject norms. So respect for elderly people might be important for you. If this is the case, you would accept, leave your place to the elderly norm, and you would behave accordingly. And values are internal standards for conduct, whereas social norms are essentially external standards. So what does that mean? Values guide your behaviors as your internal principles, okay? But social norms are socially defined, so they guide your behaviors from the outside. They are externally rewarding, whereas values are internally rewarding. That's the difference between values and norms. Beliefs are also relevant concepts in comparison to values. Beliefs refer to subjective probability judgments that a certain explanation regarding physical or social reality holds true. So if you say that, I believe going outside would be dangerous for me because it would facilitate contamination by coronavirus. Okay, that's a belief. A belief is something different than knowledge because it is subjectively defined reality, and it has a certain probability. So I believe that there exists God is a belief. Somebody would say 100%, that's a very strong belief. The probability that God exists is 100% means that this person has a very strong belief in God. If the person says the probability that a God exists is 0%, then this person does not believe in God at all, and so on. So the probability judgments are subjective. It depends on the individual's worldview. So beliefs are probability judgments about the truthness of physical and social reality. Therefore, beliefs are mental representations of what is true and false, or correct or incorrect. I mean, the values are, not the beliefs. So values are mental representations of what is true and false, or correct or incorrect. And values, similar to beliefs, are enduring beliefs about what is desirable, what is good or bad, or what is right or wrong. And values are prescriptive beliefs in the sense that they are subjective judgments of which means and ends are desirable. So if you say success is important, it means according to you it is important, because another person might believe that having good relations with other people might be more important. Okay. And finally, I'll talk about quickly about the relationship between values and attitudes, then we will have a break. And as you all, most of you have taken the social psychology course, you very well know what attitudes are, but let me remind you, the attitudes are evaluative judgments about social objects. So we make evaluations of many different social objects, physical objects, social issues, events, people. All these evaluations are called our attitudes. They are dispositions. They prepare us to behave in certain ways when we have such kind of evaluations. So an attitude is an organization of several beliefs around a specific object or situation, whereas a value refers to a single belief of a very specific kind. So an attitude organizes many different beliefs. So if you have a positive attitude towards staying home, you would think that staying home protects you from contamination. This is one belief. You might believe that staying home would protect other people to get contaminated by you. This is another belief. So an attitude organizes many beliefs, but a value is a specific single belief. Health, for instance. Health is important, is a very specific single belief. Values are presumably limited number of standards. So there are a certain set of values, let's say 100 or 200 values, okay? But we might have as many attitudes as possible, as there are different objects, people, events in the world. This might be expressed in perhaps thousands or hundreds of thousands. So values are overarching constructs. Overarching means her şeyin üstünü örten. So they are very abstract, very higher order constructs, and values organize attitudes. They determine attitudes. Now I'll stop and we will go on with the relationship between values, attitudes, and behaviors and norms and needs in the next hour. So let's have a break here.